Hello and welcome there. This video I'm just going to show you how to use the Vesta control panel to set up a domain from, say, your domain name registrar and then get it to access a website on your hosting server. In this tutorial I'm using the UpCloud cloud vendor. You can use Amazon, you can use DigitalOcean, whatever. But yeah, in this one we're using UpCloud, we're using Vesta, and obviously using terminal window as well. So we're just going to register the domain name, point the name servers and do the DNS entries, and then make sure we can access the site at the domain name. And then lastly, just do a quick install of a WordPress instance just to pop it up there. And also we're going to apply SSL certificate from Let's Encrypt as well. I mean, that's another great thing from Vesta Control Panel. They also come with the ability to apply Let's Encrypt, which is a free form of SSL encryption, which is great. One other thing before I get started is some of the other videos I've talked about the Vesta Control Panel, how easy it is, and I just came across this as well. For those of you who kind of want to get used to the shortcuts, there's a whole little quick cheat list here. So we want to go around and dive in and out of the things via the keypad. We can just press the numbers and change the particular setting that you're on. So there's lots of handy kind of helpful shortcuts in there you can use. So first of all, what we need to do is let's go and add a domain name into the Vesta control panel. So we go into the web option here, we click on the plus here and we say add web domain. So this domain name is childersphysio.com.au. Now I've registered this with Crazy Domains registrar, and that's Australia based. Of course, that's why we have a .com.au address here. And so we're going to choose we've got two IP addresses here, but I'd recommend using the one that obviously we got given in the UpCloud. That was the instance that we spun up. So we're just using that one here. You can add mail support if you want, but I'm just not going to do that in this video. So we're just going to uncheck that one. And so we're just going to look at the advanced options here as well. And so you can see here it's already plugged in an alias for us, and this is very helpful. Of course, a lot of people who visit sites still put the www prefix in front. Some people who are probably kind of a bit beyond that I know that it's not necessary and they don't use it, but it is still something out of habit a lot of people are still using, even though the web world has kind of moved on and evolved from that. So that's a good way of people who put in www to reach your site, because otherwise they wouldn't, and then there'd be people saying, where's your site, it's broken, etc. No good. And so you can see there's a lot of proxy extension support. We just leave it as a default. And this is where we can set up the SSL support. So we check that box. You know, we can register our own SSL certificate through Komodo or something similar like that. But we're going to use the Let's Encrypt option here. And you can see here, this is, you know, the SSL home. We just leave it as the default. And you can see here that Let's Encrypt says that we're going to issue your certificate in 5 minutes, which is pretty cool. Now, just a little kind of point aside on this one, we're just going to have to check the SSL is applied after we create the domain name, because sometimes in the control panel here it kind of says that you haven't done it and you have to go in there and reapply it again. So hopefully it won't happen, but it's just good to check that out. So you can even hook up some web statistics as well, so we can, you know, choose one of these guys to hook up in the control panel statistics. So that's a great feature as well, but again, I'm going to keep it short and not get into that. And also you can set up FTP accounts, which is really cool. Obviously if you have something like FileZilla or some other FTP program and you want to transfer files over, and again you could always just use SSH via scoop commands and terminal, which is just as good, but kind of limited in the sense that you know, the FTP is just a heck of a lot easier to kind of drag and drop files from your Explorer or your Finder window, each to their own really. So you know, we're just going to click add, and that's going to create the domain name for us. And so when we go into the area here, we can see that's been added at the top here, and that's obviously our kind of root IP address as well. That's always going to be there, so that's not an issue. So what we need to do is going into the DNS here, and we need to add some records. We need to add some name server records, of course, and that's just basically in preparation for the domain name. You can see here by default it's given us ns1.domain.tld, and it also does that here as well. So that's what we really need to kind of just, we're going to just add our own records first and leave those ones there. So what we're going to do is hit the add record. We're going to go NS1, and that's default. It's going to apply that in there for you. Now we just choose the IP, of course. Just make sure it matches the IP at the top here that we've got. Optional priority, you can do that to kind of push the propagation a bit faster, but we're just going to leave it as default. We're going to add that, and now we're going to add NS2 as well. It's going to pop up there, and pretty good when the form remembers what you did last time. So we're just going to click add again, and so now those records are in there. If we go ahead and just click on that area here, we could then list the 14 records. We can see that we've created those records at the top here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the registrar and create some host records. So I'm just going to log in. I'm just going to pause this video and just log into my Crazy Domains and then just show you how that's done. Okay, so this is my domain name registrar, Crazy Domains, and I've just pulled up the domain name here. So we're just going through the records. You can see here there's pretty much no DNS records at all. So what we're going to do is just add the host name first. So clicking on this area here. Now this will change depending on your registrar. A lot of people use Namecheap, and some people use, say, GoDaddy or HostGator or whatever. But the principle really still applies. We need to add the host name, and then we need to add the Nameservers that we created in the control panel, and then the domain name registrar will talk via the DNS hosting from the control panel here, and then we'll deliver the website that we've just going to create. So first of all, we go add a host record, and what we need to do is just put the IP address here. So let's just copy the IP address. And so put in NS1 to start. Okay, we go and add another one. We should have really done that all in the one go, actually, would have been easier. That's alright, so we just add those two now. So that's our host records, they're pointing towards the Nameservers, and now we're just going to add the Nameservers here. So we put in NS1 dot, don't have it remembered, so we'll just grab it from here. Yeah, it's automatically coming up there because down below we've got the host records. So you don't need to enter it in here, it already defines it from down below at the host records. So we're going to add another one down here as well, and let's make that Nameserver 2. I mean, this does seem a bit confusing and redundant. Some of the people who are familiar with this will understand this a bit better. Kind of wish it was a bit easier, but this is the way it's been set up. So we hit the update. So now that's happening, and that's going to propagate. Now, these DNS entry changes may not happen that fast. It might take some time. There are some tools up on the web that you can check and see how fast that's propagating. I'm going to quick Google check DNS records, I think, or changes. I think you could quickly look it up there and get some information about that. So this is a propagation tool here. Google is definitely a friend. Yeah, this is a very popular one. So if we just type in the domain name, we can check that how it's propagating over. So we can see here, yeah, in America, these places are already pointing it towards our IP address. So that's pretty good. You can just check that out. So that is happening pretty fast, point towards this one. So if we were to go in and check the domain name, hopefully it might be pointing towards our site. We might be lucky. But then again, don't expect it to be instant. It might take some time. Like I said before, it'll probably take a bit more time than this. What we could do is add an A record just for good measure as well. It's probably recommended that we do that. So let's just go into here and add an A record. Yeah. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to point it towards this IP address. So I'm just going to update that. We don't need to do any subdomain stuff here. I'm not going to get into that. So now we have an A record as well. So that's just, you know, for good measure that we've got that in there. We'll just check that this might have worked. It has. Oh yeah, so what I forgot to do just before, it's very tricky about this. That's why you always go to your control panel. We set up these, but we didn't actually change the name server records down here. They're pointing to this, and we just basically, I found that out by going into the DNS checker here and just checking on the name servers and just seeing that they were still registered to this bogus address up here. So what we're going to do is let's just go ahead and edit these guys here and make sure they're going to the right place. We need to make sure they're actually got the domain name in them. So let's go ahead and do that. So we just go back into the records again. We edit. Yep, so we got that there. So we need to edit this second name server here. So make sure we've done that as well. And let's just go and check them out again. Make sure there it is listed there. So we list the 14 records. Just check them out, that they're all making sense there. Yep, that seems to be right. Let's check the web and the domains. You can see again the SSL support kind of just dropped off, so that's why it's good just to go through and edit it, check it again, and the SSL support's unchecked. Now I think that's to do, what I've heard is when it's propagating, it's like you're doing two things at once. You're setting up the domain name register with the name servers and also your own DNS entries in the Vesta control panel, and I think the Vesta control panel doesn't find it, the register pointing towards it, and just goes, you know, I'm not doing this anymore, and just cancels it. So we go through and do it again. So lots of fun there. So we hit save on that, and we just wait a bit. I think it looks a bit more promising. It's taking a bit more time now. I think it's actually going to do it. In the meantime, I'm just going to go through the DNS checker and just do another search on it and run it again just to make sure. And you can see now a lot of the servers now are properly speaking to the childersphysio.com.au name server. There's a few here that are still taking their time. They're a little bit slower, of course. So yeah, they are taking their time. But these American servers, well, they're on to it very fast. So let's just go back up top here and check for SSL support. Now we can see that that's actually not got a line through it, so we can assume that's going to be working. So I'm just going to go up here and refresh the page and see if that change has actually taken effect on the server that I'm going to be accessing from. And it hasn't. So like I said, be patient. Propagation takes some time. So interestingly enough, the SSL doesn't seem to be applied to this domain name, but if we take away, if we put the www on it, the alias, it does now work. So there's sometimes still, needs to take effect. Just putting in here obviously isn't working right now, but if we were to put in the the www alias, that is working. And I think if we remove the secure socket layer, that'll also work as well. So yeah, the for some reason the Let's Encrypt on the HTTPS version without the www alias is still not working. So that'll probably take some time to resolve. But anyway, just by going through these other checks, we've found out that the domain name is properly pointing towards our hosting server on UpCloud, and also that the DNS entries we've made via the Vesta control panel and also in the domain name registrar are now working. So you can see that it's just going to a basic page here. and powered by Vesta. So Vesta is now controlling where on the server it's basically putting the domain name. And in a previous tutorial, we installed a WordPress instance, and it was in the var/www/html file path, and that's very common for Ubuntu servers for that kind of file path to exist. That's like the default one. You can set up other ones, of course, and that's exactly what VestaCp has done. It's sets it up kind of an interesting way, actually. It sets it up in a home directory because admin is a user. Obviously, it created when made your control panel, and it exists as a user along with, say, a user I created and any others that might be in there that you've created in the in the Unix terminal to your remote host. So it exists there, and it basically has a web folder, and inside the web folder you get the domain name of the site, and that exists as a folder, and then there's another folder inside of that called a public HTML, which then hosts your website file system. So what I'm going to do is quickly to show you what that kind of looks like, because I know I talked about it, but actually visually seeing it's probably a bit easier. Again, if you've got a FTP program, it's probably going to make your life a lot easier as well. So what we're going to do is cd into, one common mistake I even made was cd into home. It says it doesn't exist. No, you can't do it because home doesn't exist from my actual user directory. We need to go cd/home. So that's on the top parent level. So now we're in there. We can do ls/la command, and you can see here we've got my kind of home folder, my users home folder, and you've got the admin users folder. I kind of wish that VestaCp would do it a bit better than this, because admin just doesn't sound right to me. It sounds like it should be a bit kind of more descriptive. But anyway, that's the way it works. cd admin, and you look in there, you've got a bunch of stuff. You can see they've got the Softalicious tool package in there, some bash and profile stuff like some scripts, configuration files where you can do your mail server stuff, and that's where your website will live, inside the web folder. So you cd into the web folder, and let's do another list LA, and you can see here we've got the original installation of the IP, and that was set up when we installed the Vesta control panel. And in the Vesta control panel you can see that that's the default domain that was registered here, and I believe that's where the actual Vesta control panel installation files live. They live inside of this folder here. But I won't go into that in this video. What you really need to know is inside this Childers Physio folder, we'll just go in there, or whatever your domain name that you pointed over, that's what it'll be. So if I go into there, well, it's not really liking me there, is it? So let's just do a sudo ls/la. Yeah, okay. So that's great. It's protected. That's probably a good thing. So what we can see here is we can see a bunch of folders here. We can see one for the logs, document errors, a CGI bin, which is pretty standard, a private. Not really going to get into those ones. What we can see is a public HTML and a public _shtml. That's a new one for me. I might have to make a video about that later on. I did see that option in the control panel before. Not sure what it's really about. I think it might be another way of securing up your website. But yeah, if you go cd into the public _html folder, why isn't it not tabbing over? Anyway, you can probably see there might be a file in there. Well, if it'll let me do it. So you can see there's an index file and a robots file as well. So robots is pretty good. It's already hopefully going to crawl your site. So that's probably another default feature that Vesta Control Panel is going to do. And we can see here that the owner of this file is admin. And in the previous video, I did say that if you're going to put in a dynamic website like WordPress, Drupal, Joomla, or Concrete 5, whatever you want to use, you're most likely going to have to change the ownership and the file use permissions to the Apache server, which is www-data, and we can do that. That's pretty easy to do. So let's just go and vim this index file and change it. So what I'm going to do is just prove that I can access this file and change something on it. So we're actually going to do that now. So it's got file permissions on it. We're going to sudo vim the index file. You can see here it's basically done, it's made this basic HTML, put it in there, and you can see that's the H1 tile it is. And what I'm going to do is just insert some extra HTML in there. I'm going to make a H2 now and say hello world. We have pointed our domain name. Okay, so we're just going to escape that and close and save the terminal or the Vim. And if I refresh this page, we should be able to see that we've created a H2 tag down below, just there. So now we know where we can place our file systems and hook it up to database and stuff like that, and just basically run our website now. So another video I showed you how to just sit a WordPress site just on the top level, which is the var www html. And that wasn't using the Vesta control panel to register a domain name at all. That was just placing it on a subdirectory of here, which funnily enough doesn't even actually go into the one inside the web where we were before. Let's just go a few levels up. So before we just saw that we had that folder sitting here, but doesn't even go there. But yeah, point being, I'm rambling a bit too much. What we're saying is if you're going to assign domain names through the Vesta control panel, it pretty much changes where you're going to put your sites. If you're going to do single site installs, could be different. And if you use a different control panel, it can probably do it differently. But this is just the VestaCp way of doing things. So this is why I'm trying to make this very explicit, because when I was on the web looking for answers about this, I wasn't really finding much information, so I'm going to make this video pretty clear to you guys who might find this useful. So this is, pretty simple how we've just set this up. Now I can install a WordPress website, pretty simple, and I'm just going to quickly do that through the control panel. So what we want to do is we're going to go into databases, and we'll just create a new one. We're going to call this probably a good thing to name it, close enough to the website, because it makes sense when you're going through what databases link to what site, basically. Again, don't use a password like this, but this is just easy for the tutorial for me to remember. So we go ahead, and what I would recommend doing is, the default's UTF-8, but the difference really is about the encryption. You can actually encrypt 4 kilobytes, I think, in the file names in the UTF-MB8, which is better, especially when I found this being an issue, is when you have databases where you've kind of got files and a very complicated structure, and you've got lots of information encoded into that. Your database tends to have issues with it. It doesn't happen for many people, but for really big websites with lots of information and lots of legacy items, it does become an issue eventually. So I'd recommend using this particular char set rather than UTF-8 ones. And again, we can send the information to an email address, which is really handy. So we hit the add button, and if we go into the databases, we of course can see that database here. And of course, the passwords are going to be hidden. That makes sense. So now that we're in here, of course, we're just going to go into the CD childers 0, and what we want to do is just do a sudo wget on the WordPress install latest. So I'm going to do that here, sudo wget. I think I can remember this off by heart now. Been there a few times. Latest.zip. Yeah, that looks like that's where it lives, so that was pretty handy. Once you do it a few times, you will remember it. So let's do a list LA. Of course, it's been denied. So we can see here all the files here, and admin again isn't really going to cut it. We need to give the file permissions to the Apache server. So I'm just going to go in and clean up that latest file zip. It's a good idea to try and clean up your file system whenever you can, otherwise it just gets really curly afterwards and you don't want to deal with that stuff. especially if you're working in a team and someone's being just messy and leaving their files everywhere. It's not good. So what we want to do is I'm going to quickly check if we've got the file permission. And that's why the good thing about history, if you can't really remember your stuff, you can just go up there. I mean, if you type in history, you can actually get a list of what you have, and you can go find it via a number. But mine was maybe 15 spaces back, so I've just found it here. So what we can see here is the sudo chown thing, but we've got to change this because we're not doing it to the var www directory anymore. We need to do it for the children's physio one. So what we can do is we can see we've got the file path here. So it's pretty straightforward what we need to do. So we just need to type in home /admin /web /childers physio.com.au. Now what we should do is put it in the public HTML, of course. Alright, so if we go cd into the public HTML, well, we can see here now that www data has been applied there, and I've just noticed I made a bit of an issue before. I downloaded the latest .zip file into the wrong directory, and then I deleted it. So we're just going to do that again. I'm pretty sure I can just find it if I go up a few times, a few layers, and so there it is there. We're just going to install it, download it, and then we're just going to run the unzip command. You can do it as a tar file, but sometimes I just find the unzip command a lot easier to run than untarring files. So yeah, each their own really. Zip. Hang on. So let's just do sudo unzip latest.zip. Okay, so that's done pretty quick work of it. Let's just check the file system again. Yeah, so we can see that the WordPress folder has root applied on it. Again, not a good thing. We want to change that. We want to make it www data. So that's a bit of an issue. First of all, I'll just remove the latest zip file just to clean it up a little bit. So what we want to do is just go and find that chown command again and recursively do it down through the WordPress folder. So hopefully we can get that right this time. And we'll change it to WordPress. Okay, it's now applied correctly. So let's try and cd into the WordPress folder and see if it did recursively go and do it to the files inside. Never assume everything's done here. You've always got to check. So you can see now that all the www-data has been applied correctly. So we should, if we go to that URL, be presented with the WordPress 5-minute installation process. It's really less than 5 minutes now. It's like a minute. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. And firstly, we do have an index.html file in this server right now, and that's all this directory. And that's going to be a problem because it's always going to read first before any other files because it has priority. So let's first of all remove this file. And we'll just do a sudo list again just to see, just to make sure it's gone. So another thing also is that WordPress zip file has unzipped and unpackaged itself into a WordPress directory, which is not really what we want. We want to have just the files sitting on this level of the directory, not in a sub-level. So we just can do a shell command here. So we can just do a sudo move, and we'll move everything inside the WordPress folder with the asterisk command, and then we're just going to long tail it in basically to where we are right now. again, if we do a list, we can see here that it's moved all the contents out of that WordPress folder and put them on this, this level of directory. Lastly, what we need to do is just sudo remove the WordPress directory, because it really should be empty right now, not necessary. So I just want to do a quick list to make sure it's gone. Yeah, it's great. So the great thing is about what we've done to the directory before with the chown permissions, that every file that we're going to put in there now is going to inherit this www-data ownership and file permissions, so then Apache server can run it. So finally, let's go back to the website and see if the WordPress installation is now going to begin. So there we go, it's now coming up. So we hit the let's go, we've got all the details here. So first of all, we go into the Vesta control panel and get the details about the database. Let's paste that in there. And that's the username. I actually forget the database password because it's been a while. I copied it somewhere but lost it. So what we'll do is we'll just generate it here on the spot here, copy it over, and just save it. It's obviously a good idea to keep it somewhere safe, you know, so you don't have this problem. But the great thing is if you can get into your admin panel, you can always reset it. So then we just put it into here and submit. Okay, so this kind of problem does come up occasionally again as well. Not only do we need to give the files the right permissions and levels, we also need to change the chmod permissions on the actual files themselves. So let's go ahead and look at doing that. So what I'm going to try and do here is just change the chmod permissions of everything inside this public HTML folder. So we just want to, first of all, I just want to log into it again. It's expired. So you can see the public HTML there, we've got that. So what we're going to do is just do a chmod, cursively 755 into public HTML. So that should have changed the file permissions a little bit there. Should have been the operative word. Yeah, I believe it has. So you can see here that was what it was before, and that's what it is now. So let's just go ahead and get into this installation. Hopefully we can just run the installation now. It should bypass this. And yeah, we need to restart again. So again, I'm just going to go through and copy the information out of here. And you're still going to sometimes encounter some issues, so you just need to do some troubleshooting. Another thing you can try is another chmod setting to the parent folder, although you might want to just check your permissions later on and make sure they're not kind of leaving your open vulnerable to some attacks. So I just got this command off before, part of the parent, that's the part of the parent folder, so just going to operate a sudo on it. So we don't really need to worry about the path too much, that's just straight up public HTML. So sudo ls, actually let's go cd into public HTML folder. And you know, any new files that get created here should inherit that what we basically set up before. So let's go ahead and run the installation. and we're going to pretty much, you might have to do this a few times to get it right, but definitely document down your solution to see what fixes it. Like what I'm doing now might not be your particular solution, but it has to do with file permissions and letting the server and letting WordPress create files, because what it needs to do is it needs to use the WP config sample file and create a new WP config file from that. And again, it's not really working out, so I'm just going to create the WP config ourselves and paste this content into it, and it should work for us. So there is a solution, and I'll post a solution about this later on. Like I've made several other installs and managed to fix it, but the way Vesta control panel manages it is probably something different. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically sudo copy the wp config sample.php file into a wp-config.php file. So if I run that, we should now see that we've got a WP config file. Interestingly enough, it still applies this root permission. That's probably what's happening and what's causing the issue. For some reason, it should be inheriting this recursively that we set up, but for some reason it isn't, and that's something we need to explore. So what we need to do is, obviously, let's go ahead and get that set up properly. So we need to chown that directory properly. So sudo chown, I don't need it recursively this time because we're only doing it one file. And we're doing it to the wp config.php file. So if I look at that file now, it should have the right permissions assigned to it. So that's great. What I'm going to do is just copy this content from here that it tried to write to the file for us. And sudo vim the wp config file. Now, so what I believe we can do is just put a command in. So I've just seen it here. We just put in :1, $D. That deletes everything in the file. So it's, compared to an ID or a text editor, it's a little bit kind of clunky. I just tried to do a kind of command A and select everything, but that's just not going to work because it's not the same as a program. We're in the server itself. So just copying this information. Thankfully, the command V or control V works here. So if we click the insert button, we paste it. That's all in there now. We can check that out. Scroll down further. So now we're going to just escape that and leave it. So we now have that file there. If we wanted to go in and sudo it again, we should be able to see that information. And if we could scroll up, we could see the salts have been created and all this information is in here as well. So let's just escape that. And let's just run the installation. Now that we've copied the files and that we've given the right file permissions, if we hit run the installation, this should now pretty much do its thing, which we've done. So there's a few ways to solve the issue. It really kind of nags at me that the WordPress installation wasn't able to create that file, but I'm pretty sure I know why it wasn't able to create and run it. It was because it still had the root permission tied to it, so the parent folder file permissions hasn't been properly set. Okay, so we set up a username, and probably won't make this as complex. I'll just delete that off there, and that's very weak. Well, that's harsh. I don't think we can actually use that, so put 99 exclamation mark or something in there. I think Medium might let us do it. And put my email at hotmail.com, something like that. It'll email you and everything. Everything else is pretty much probably familiar with anyway. So if we go ahead and just log in now, we go admin_childers, we'll set up, and we put this in. We've now got the WordPress website. So this is now a registered domain, and we've now got a WordPress installation at it. So if anyone goes on the World Wide Web and looks for it, we can see that the website now resolves to this. And let's just go ahead and check and see if the non-alias version works now. It's been a bit of time to propagate along the servers. So now it works. It now basically does the redirect properly to the www version. Really, it should be working the other way around, but we can go in the control panel here and change the way the alias works. But essentially, we've got the WordPress website up with the domain name, and we've used Vesta control panel along with the domain name and the registrar to achieve that. And that's how simple it can be. The only kind of tricky bit is when the server wants to write that wp config file. So there's a few ways you can troubleshoot that. I hope this has been helpful for some of you guys who are using cloud servers and the open source Vesta control panel. So good luck with creating your WordPress websites or anything else you want to install.